Hello, it's finally time for an Open.HD update. Can you believe the last Open.HD video I did was back in July 2021? But since that time I haven't stopped still. I've been beavering away behind the scenes trying to get stuff working. This is why I'm here in this portion of the video, aside from doing an intro. I was sort of filming all the way along my successes and failures, and I wanted to put them in a video here. So if you want to watch me fail lots of times and why it failed, then carry on watching. If you want to skip straight over to me flying successfully this dude, I'm going to put some timestamps down the bottom so you can see what's what. But for everybody else, to bring things up to date, on my last video, which was number 4, which I'll link to up here, we'd successfully driven this car around and that was okay. And so the idea was to move it onto a quad. And I'd chosen this quad because it was really big and I thought it'd be easy to fit the stuff in. But what I wanted to do was go and test the iNav config before putting Open.HD on it to make sure it was flyable and that it would position, hold and come home, all that sort of stuff. So let's pick up the story there and going back and trying to correct one of the problems I had about the compass with the car, the fact it wasn't working. And what I'll do, I'll put some little titles on so you can see whenabouts in the year this was and when I was doing certain things, and I will catch up with you in various bits of voiceovers and the conclusions afterwards. But for now, on with the story. Okay, we should have fixed that problem we were having with the home arrow. If we turn the car, that arrow stays nice and gentle. Turn the car around. We've got a nice degree symbol. And this part, as several people told me, was just a case. Changing that bit so it says UAV is iNav to off, because this was pre 2.6. And that's all okay now. Okay, this clip's still from August 2021, but having listened to it, I was sort of rambling a bit. To put it in context, what I'd done is put this Omnibus F4 board into the F450 and got iNav set up on it. What I then discovered, having done all that, is I didn't have another UART. I thought I had UART 3, but looking at it was shared with something else for the compass. And I realised at this point this board wasn't going to be no good. I had to have telemetry to pass into the Pi for Open.HD, and not having that meant I would have to swap this board out. So perhaps the most obvious thing to do is to take this board from the car. This is an F7 board, so it's got a lot more UARTs, and it's already wired for the Pi 0, so I could just transport all this into there. And even if I just start with a regular FPV camera, I've still got the wiring here that I can do and sort of preserve some of it and mess about with the other stuff. So yeah, we're gonna, I don't like destroying configs that I've already done, but I kind of need to anyway, because I haven't got a spare one of these Wi-Fi adapters, and I'm going to need the Pi 0 from here, so you know, we're going to rip bits out anyway, so let's get on with it. I quite enjoyed the iNav idea of the car though, so maybe I'll put this guy back in there and make that iNav Rover at some point as well. Strip there. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good about doing this ridiculous thing about having all these servo connectors so I could easily take this on and off. It was actually more about changing the config of this, but this is quite handy. I can just build a new one of these to go into here. And in fact, one of the issues with this one is it still has these servo connectors on those old ESCs, which I don't necessarily want to get rid of. So although it's a bit weird having servo connectors here, it kind of fits into this sort of old style of what I've got here. I'm still going to need this back to supply the power to this guy. But yeah, that's about it. I just need to get this on here and wire this in. I might swap out the receiver while I'm at it. Yeah, that didn't take long to strip out. You see I've got servo connectors on absolutely everything, just because I figured I was going to have to put the Pi in there, but I did think it was going to use the same flight controller, which is over here looking good. So not so bad, as I said, because I'll be connecting these ESCs up to this. However, because I was using actual servos for this, what I did is I wired in from here. This would go to the back, and this is supplying the ground and 5 volts to the servos, because we can't run the servos from here. We didn't have enough power, so I do need to change that about, because I just literally need, well, I can just snip off basically, because I've got the ground and power coming up through this sort of PCB distribution on the bottom, all I need is the signal pin because everything else is common. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this Zeus F7 flight controller ripped out of the car and plonked into the DJI 450 frame. If we just zoom in a bit, you can see that we've basically got the camera connector in here. We've got voltage and ground going in there as well to supply. At the side here we've got the compass GPS, which goes into a connector here. These three connectors are the VTX, which is just some basic one. What I have got just here floating around, the original connector which goes into one of the TXs somewhere or other, I don't know because I had so many cables lying around they got bundled up here. I think this goes into TX6 or something. There's a connector there. Anyway, when I put the Pi on it, that needs to be plugged in. And in the meantime I went all sort of new age, and over here is a Express LRS receiver which is wired into here. Once I'm happy, and hopefully I am, that this will fly okay using iNav, I can then remove the VTX, remove the camera, plug the ESC in and shove that in there somewhere. It doesn't have to be pretty, which is just as well. And then I can put the Pi Zero and camera in here, take it through to here where I can also put in the Wi-Fi thingy, and plug that all in. And then I've got obviously this power from the ESC for the Pi along with the telemetry from iNav, and I'll be staying on the ELRS module for flying. That should be it. So yeah, let's see if this flies first and then we'll do the transformation. Well, it's not super pretty, but it seems to be position holding just about in the garden where I haven't got an awful lot of space, so that holds well, I think, for doing return to home and stuff, at least. Hello, we've had an exciting time of releasing some cows into that field, which was slightly frightening, but okay. Testing today this quad, which has iNav on it. We need to make sure that position hold is okay and that return to home works before we can put Open.HD in it. Also testing out the Express LRS receiver and transmitter, seeing if that's okay. Going to do some line of sight stuff first to check position hold and return to home. Then do a bit of FPVing as well, see how that is. Let's start.
Angle mode.
So this is the quad in angle mode. I found it a little bit wobbly in angle mode, but it's kind of okay. There's a little bit of breeze around, so I'm going to put it in position hold now. So I've got my hand off. Seems to be doing an okay job of holding position. The height looks good. It's a bit wobbly, but this is the case of a 9-year-old quad in PWM ESCs. So I'm going to take out a position hold, get a bit further, and then we're going to try a return to home. Took off from this landing mat, so let's see if we can get anywhere near here. Okay, so we're back in normal mode. Fly out over here a bit.
4 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's really windy there, you can feel it. And return to home. So it's gone straight up in the air. So if you don't get directly
I'm a
under
bit
it, just in case.
Oh no, Dad, what?
How's it doing? Well, it's within the vicinity. Might hit my backside.
Not quite.
Still a bit wobbly.
Oh.
Are they going to fire off? No. Keep going. So that's not bad actually, is it? So you look at it.
Less than a metre off.
We're about a metre.
Yeah.
For this old girl, that's not bad going.
No.
Not bad going at all.
Did think it was going to hit us at some point. That's a concern.
It's a big quad, and when you're underneath it, well, you don't want to be underneath it, do you?
You don't want to be underneath it.
Because it's a good like kilogram and a half at least. So yeah, best avoided. So I'm going to try a bit of FPV now, so see how it feels. Making sure. Yeah, it could definitely be more stable. Doesn't like being going against the wind, it would seem.
Once again, this is still from August 2021, and although the quad looked fairly good in line of sight and looks good from the external angles, as soon as I was flying at FPV, I was just like, oh my god, this is awful. It just was all over the place, and I spent several batteries and lots of attempts to try and get this tuned. I was playing with everything, but I just could not get it to an acceptable standard. I even, because it was just so wobbly, I just didn't feel I could land it. iNav, on the other hand, performed really well in terms of both holding its position during all these wobbles and managing to fly home, because there's no way I could fly it. So every time I took off, I was using RTH to actually land it again. So nope, this didn't work, so we didn't get anywhere close to installing Open.HD on this config.
So I think the problem is these 30 amp ESCs. I always thought, hey, this quad used to fly great, but when I looked back, it was actually always shaky, and I guess that's why we were fitting 2-axis and 3-axis gimbals on to try and get better footage. So ESCs are not something I have kicking around that much, but I had this old board that I used in review ages and ages ago, I mean many years, but they did speak D-Shot 600. They are 35 amp and they are significantly smaller. So what I did is desoldered all those ESCs. I put one on to test and ran it at D-Shot 600, and that looked fine. So I thought, I'm going to go round, I'm going to replace the rest of these, and we'll see how it goes. Now, it's never going to be as easy to tune as a 5-inch, because these are 900 kV motors, they're running larger props, so they just can't start and stop at the same sort of rate. So we're always going to have a little bit more to do than a 5-inch, but I figure we're now able to update a lot more often, so that's got to be better. So yeah, I'm going to configure the rest of this up, and basically I want to try and refly this until it gets to a point of view where it's smooth enough that I'm confident about putting the HD stuff on there.
Looks fairly smooth to me. Looks fairly smooth in the FPV feed. Definitely smoother than it was. Certainly not perfect though.
Here we are again, D-Shot 300 with the little ESCs. Let's hope this works better and we can get a decent FPV flight. It's actually quite breezy. We're slightly protected here, but I figure that's a good thing, because if we can't handle a bit of breeze with a quad this size, we're pretty much screwed. So fingers are crossed again.
One thing I neglected to explain is why this is flying in D-Shot 300 instead of D-Shot 600. Although I tested one motor and the ESC out fine in D-Shot 600, as soon as I put them all on, they just wouldn't run correctly. So I went down to D-Shot 300, that seemed okay, but look at this footage yet again, it's just terrible. I was beginning to feel pretty dejected at this point. I'd done everything I felt I could on this frame and it just wasn't doing it, and it just would not fly. So yet again I'm having to do a return to home to get it to return, and it's just all going quite wrong.
I think the answer sadly is no, it's still shite. Maybe there's some tuning to do, but maybe I just have to move to a different platform altogether now. This is just horrible.
Here's what I'm now thinking. This is a 6-inch Tyro something, 119 I think this was. Done a couple of videos on it, use it for various bits and pieces. I'm thinking it already flies okay. Can I simply squidge that in there somehow and just transform something that can already fly. So I'm going to take it apart and see if it can, because I'd be taking out the VTX and the antenna and that camera, and I think that's going to buy me some room. Let's try it. Well, I initially felt quite pleased because I could put the whole Pi Zero there, the top would fit on, the camera could be angled, and then I realised that I hadn't taken into account the props, which would all hit it. So somehow that Pi Zero needs to go on top of there. Somehow. Not quite sure how, but I think it can be made to work. We just need to have a bit of a mess around.
Well, feast your eyes upon this thing. I don't know what else to call it. Weirdly, despite this being a 6-inch quad and having a frame for it, the actual space in there is really limited. We've got literally a place to put a single stack in, and that's about it. So when it came to putting the Pi Zero on, there wasn't space. So I had a very quick and basic design and came up with this idea to hold the Pi on the side, and it's kind of glued in underneath the stack. So this bit just screws into the holes there, and we're taking power here, and we've got telemetry coming out from Betaflight sending Mavlink to the telemetry pin. There were some definite issues here, that one of which is being the camera. If you can see, the cable comes out, goes round really tightly and comes out there. It was so tight that the initial one I tried on, it didn't work, and it turned out there was a slight rip just there. Because there's a stupid PCB on the cable and it can't go round, it had to go back like that and then like that and then go round. It's just put too much strain on it. These ribbon cables are absolutely horrific. Anyway, what we've actually got coming out is, yeah, that power thing. So we're supplying power to this quite large BEC that's sat on there. The BEC supplies the 5 volt to the Pi. The Pi then brings out a USB into here, the ACES connector. You can see how big this is and how small this frame is. This is hanging out way too much over the end. And that's the right crappy Pi camera there. And we've got the GPS out here. We got a replacement antenna from Beta FPV. They sent us a proper full-size one. So we've still got the ELRS 868 system on, but at least a decent size. Now, I've powered this up. I've checked it connects to the Open.HD server. You'll notice here as well, we're actually using a circular polarized antenna. Had a word with Greg from Menace, and he said, like, whatever it uses, you should still get a definite advantage from using circular polarization, especially in quads where you're moving around, because we won't get that depolarization that you might do on the linear. Yeah, so it connects, we get a view, we get some telemetry coming out. I'm not sure if the GPS is sending the right telemetry because I haven't put it outside. I'm just going to go and try and fly this thing and see what happens, essentially, because I'm now fed up with building quad after quad and not being able to fly it. So at least I know this should work. We've had to update Betaflight to a later version so I could have the CRSF stuff going on. But yeah, let's try it. That'll be the next thing, getting a weather day so we can actually take this guy out and see what happens when we try and fly it. This will fly in 4S, or go up to 6S. I don't think we need to go too fast, but yeah, fingers are crossed. You'll notice even with this on the side, the clearance on these props are, you know, there's not much there. This is so weird because you think the quad was big, but putting on a Pi Zero, awful. The way I've seen it better, and I'll talk about who I saw later on in the video, is where you've got longer frames, especially ones that are designed to put the DJI FPV system in. You generally have a stack and a secondary thing behind, and that length will really help to put stuff on. Where we've got a very short base, it's very difficult, but hey, let's try and fly it, see what happens. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I was going to go straight out and fly this thing in a field, but instinctively I thought, you know what, I should really make sure this hovers and everything's good. And I'm really glad I did, because I would have had a wasted trip. Here's what happened. I basically armed my quad and I started to take off, and then I'm flying this line of sight, and I glanced down to the tablet to see what was happening, and this happened. It was absolutely frozen. I thought, oh, that's bad. Let's reboot it, try it again. So after the reboot, I had another attempt at flying, and it's looking fine from my point of view because I'm flying line of sight. I had everything hooked up to make sure the goggles were working, to make sure the tablet was recording okay, and I just wanted to make sure this would fly and continue to get a picture. And then what happened is exactly the same thing that happened before. We just froze up and it did not come back. It lost its connection essentially. I'm still flying the quad. That hasn't crashed or anything because I'm still flying via Express LRS and that's all normal, but the Open.HD footage is not there. Okay, we've come a sort of crop with this one, and I think it's because this is in there so tight that it's easily ripping out of there with the vibrations. That's mostly because of this hard piece here. So in order to get that round, we're basically having to get sort of this angle. This one actually already ripped just here because of the pressure put on it, so that's not good. So we had to bite the bullet and go with a much more expensive camera, which is this one from Arducam, which is a higher quality, and this is the cable for the regular Pi 4. It's got a Pi 0 cable, but the cables are replaceable. There's no PCBs in there, so they're nice and flexible. Still not round, which would be better. But this is not a great lens. It's like 3.9mm or something. So I've gone ahead and bought another lens with that one. But I'll plug this one in first, just make sure I get a picture. Then we'll try getting the lens in, and then we'll figure out how to mount it. We've got some mounting points here. It's a little bit different to the current one. It's all a bit exposed here, which isn't good, but let's give it a go, see what happens.
Okay, well there's the lens on, and it was actually quite out of focus to begin with, but there's just a reference shot of what we can see. It doesn't look too narrow an angle, but we're going to put the other one in and have a look now and see how it looks. That's the new lens on and in focus. Much more wide angle. So much sharper than the, yeah, that's nasty. So this camera's so much better. That lens a bit narrow. But there's no locking ring on this, so we might have to put just a dab of hot glue or something just to make sure it doesn't go out of focus. Okay, let's now try attaching this properly and seeing if it will stay in place when we fly it.
The only problem with this camera is it was a bit weird in terms of the mounting holes, and it had some raised components on the back and you needed to fit a ribbon cable in. So I came up with this design on Fusion 360, although this was about version 4 by the time I got there. And in retrospect, perhaps I needed a little bit more angle to angle the camera up a bit more, but I figured I wouldn't be going fast, so a sort of flat camera is okay. Printed this out and it looked pretty good. The idea of the other holes on the outside are to put some cable ties round, and this is the camera mounted on board, and you can see we've got room for the cable underneath, and we lift it off so nothing touches the back. And mounting it to the quad here, I've got cable ties just going around the riser bars. We've got room underneath for that cable, and it goes in the side of the Pi. Still not ideal because ribbon cables are awful, but what we're not doing is putting any particular pressure on them. So next it was out back in the garden to try and fly this thing once again. And in the garden I basically took a 6S 50 mAh battery and I flew the whole lot. I would fly for a bit, then I would land and go back and double check the tablet it was still doing stuff. I would pick the quad up and give it a good old shake, and I would try and fly, you know, as aggressively as I could in the confines of my garden, and it seemed to behave absolutely fine.
Okay, I think we've got forwards, apart from me almost slipping over on this thing. I've just flown this now for 5 minutes, wiggling it all around and all sorts, and we can see if we do this, we've still got a picture. Everything's working fine. That new camera seems to be working really well, so we are ready to test in the field. Hooray! Hello and welcome to the field. We're here finally to try an outside test of Open.HD on a quad. The quad is currently sat there, just waiting to come on and get a picture. We got all the other bits here. It's like a lot of stuff to bring, and got the goggles there, and it looks like it's just connecting.
So yeah, in a second we're going to stop messing around and actually fly this thing. And why don't I just go ahead and film myself for the hell of it. There's our picture, and we'll see what happens. That'll be fun, won't it? We hope, or something.
Okay, so my situation is I don't have quite the right sight for this. I'm short-sighted, but the sort of the vision's okay, but not perfect. But let's just try it. I've waited too long, so I just want to get on with it now. We're going to take it easy, see what happens. If it goes down, it goes down. Well, we're flying. Getting a bit of breakup sometimes, but generally it feels like we're flying. There's me. Definitely got a little bit of a wobble in the picture from that camera. So I guess it's my mount. But yeah, we was flying. Bit nervous doing this, but it seems to be behaving so far. Nothing's gone bad.
4 minutes.
I think the problem would be on the crash, aside from the fact we've got things that, you know, would snap and break, and that would be a pain. The wetness, you know, we wouldn't get another chance of it today because it is seriously wet over these fields.
So I did narrate this whole flight, but I was really just flying around going, oh look, I'm flying, and I cocked a couple of things up on the config, which is why we've got a 0 in that left-hand ladder, because I didn't wait for enough sats to connect. So I'm going to skip ahead to when we land this, and then we'll talk about what happened during flight number 2.
Just trying to get a feel for how quickly it reacts as I'm coming in. And yeah, it's like a little delay on it, but it's not too different from flying a not very powerful quad where there's a delay between your throttle and the response from the throttle, if you like. Come, trying to turn on me. Yay!
Disarmed.
So yeah, we had one or two issues with breakup and stuff, but that was invigorating. Let's call it. It's not often that I'm like, oh, about, like, you know, flights get me all sort of nervous and excited, but that was quite good for that sort of situation. Anyway, let's stop this recording and do another flight, see how we go.
Okay, so what I'm showing here is a small portion from flight number 2. I'm using still the 6S battery, and I did mention in that little bit of narration that if you treat it like a sort of big underpower quad that sort of had a delay when you did stuff, that's a good way of thinking about it. But at the same time, it's pretty responsive on 6S, this quad, especially when you're coming into land. So the slightest little flick on the throttle can make it go up a long way, and that's where the latency, and this is around the 100 milliseconds, will sort of catch you. But for sort of cruising around like this, I don't really notice that much. If you were doing lots of sort of flippy flappy loops and rolls and stuff, you'd notice it a lot more. Or if you're trying to get through very tight gaps, obviously that latency is going to be a problem with you. Now, the reason I want to show this one is because you'll notice we've got quite a lot of breakup here, and if you look at a stat up on the top left, there's this one called D and L. L is lost packets, and in these first two batteries I was getting an average of about 7%, which seems quite high, and you can see every now and then I have sort of 3/4 of the screen breaks up. The other thing I noticed is most people flying Open.HD are either using ArduPilot or iNav, and both of these have a really good story about passing through the amount of telemetry that will really populate your OSD with the right information. Betaflight is a little bit behind on this, as I found out. So what we're getting from Betaflight now, in my goggles I can see the lat long, and down at the bottom right you can see we've got 10 sats, but we're not getting any details about how far we are away from home. We're not getting our direction, our home arrow. We are getting speed. That's what we've got over on the ladder on the left hand side there, and our height, the ladder on the right hand side. We're getting RSSI, but I really don't want this RSSI signal because RSSI over ELRS is rubbish. What we want is the link quality or the raw dBm RSSI, because the actual RSSI signal is not very useful. We're also not getting flight modes. That's what we would have in the center bottom there. Now I already talked to Open.HD about is this expected, and the big support for Betaflight telemetry is expected in version 2.1. This is version, I think I'm on 2.08, so 2.1 hasn't come out yet. When it does, hopefully we'll have a lot more of this. But one thing you can do on this is, because I forgot to put battery voltage on the recording. It's in my goggles so I know what I'm doing, but you can set it up with Q Open.HD to have a completely different screen, so you can get completely different data. So I want to show you the recording on one thing, and I can have slightly different data in my goggles if I want to. But that's just an oversight from my view. I should have been recording the battery voltage as well. I did do a couple of rolls. I just wanted to see that the camera was secure and the cables wouldn't fall out or anything. Not fast rolls, as you'll notice, quite sedate. But yeah, the flying wise, there's certainly latency there, but it's something I could easily get used to. As I said, if you were flying on much tighter, more demanding areas, you'd notice it a lot more. So I treat this quad as a sort of cruisy thing. But you've seen the breakup. Let's move over to flight 3 because things went a little bit differently there. Yep, I cannot resist filming a fly past, and no difference in this one. So the reason this flight was significant was because of the lost packet ratio. When I started, it's looking the same as the past two results at about 7%. What I had to do in this one is shift about some wires a bit to get a better position on my goggles, and I ended up, because that RSSI value was always so low, even though it's not really anything to do with the link quality, I tried lifting my antenna up a bit more, and at about 1.5 minutes into the flight, everything suddenly got really clear, which is at about this time. And I didn't notice for a while because I was just flying around quite happily, and then I realised that I wasn't getting any breakup, and I thought, wow, this is working really nicely. Of course, my big pain with this is I don't know what I did differently. I was thinking, is it the way I'm holding up the antenna? Is the 868 signal interfering somehow? Is the fact I had some power lines moving around and I've moved those about making a difference? But whatever it was, I was really pleased it happened, because getting this constant and very nice picture was absolutely lovely. Now, the DVR is recording in 720p at 30 frames a second. I have uploaded one of these to YouTube before at 720p, and I noticed that YouTube absolutely destroys it. So anything past about, it seems, 5 feet beyond, straight in front of you, just turns into this unfocused mush. So I just have to assure you that it looks nice and sharp. And what I'm going to do with this video, even though none of it's filmed in 4K, is upload it in 4K, because YouTube generally gives a much nicer compression ratio with that. So we'll try that and see what it is. But it looked really nice. I dare say it doesn't look as nice as stuff like DJI or even the latest SharkBite stuff, what that's doing, HD0 or whatever it is. But hey, I'm running a couple of pies here, and that seems like a great adventure to me. I have gone back since and talked to Open.HD, and we've come up with some different suggestions about the specific 5.8 frequency I'm using on the Wi-Fi adapters, and also the power ratio they're putting out, to see if that helps, because there was some talk about other providers broadcasting on certain frequencies. So I'll try that out and come back to it. But I am just having a fantastic time right now. And in the course of the flight, I noticed that the lost packet ratio drops from 7% to 2%, and at 2% you don't seem to get any breakup at all. So that's, I guess, what we're looking for. Now, I do notice as well that that camera, the shake of it, seems to be down to a certain frequency I'm flying at. I notice it when I'm descending. When I'm pulling back on the throttle and letting it descend more, that's when I get that wobble. So it seems to be a frequency based thing, based around the sort of the prop speed. But yeah, everything looks absolutely gorgeous in even in these goggles. What I was mentioning before is I am short-sighted. I normally use a custom diopter which is about -6.5 in at least -6.25, and you know, there's other bits. These goggles are very different than the normal box goggles. These are the ESCs goggles 2, and what they don't have the normal Fresnel lens where you can focus it. They just have the screen in front of you. So what it seems to be is you've got a screen very close to your eyes, and that kind of works for me being short-sighted. It's not 100% sharp, but you know, I can see the numbers and stuff, so it's not bad. What I'd like is to use my regular goggles with my regular diopters, and that would be much easier on my face. But my regular goggles are Dominator V3 Fat Sharks, and they have a native resolution of 640 by 480. So it seems pretty pointless putting an HD picture into goggles which are then going to scale it down into a standard definition picture. So perhaps in the future I might be able to get some more sort of compact goggles, and hopefully I might be able to do a little bit more to make the wiring a little bit tidier, so I'm not just sat on the floor. Because obviously, as well as me sitting on the floor, my antenna for my Wi-Fi signal is also about 4 inches off the floor, and obviously as high as you can get that is going to have a better signal. So these are many things to try and get a better signal. But the main thing we got here is I got 3 flights done. All the flights are about 9 minutes. My 6S battery is lasting for ages because I'm taking it quite easy and cruising. We didn't crash. I was able to accurately land. I didn't have a problem with any latency, and I didn't have any sort of freezes up or anything like that. So a successful day all in all.
3 batteries done, no crashes, that's a success. Now, quite why the last flight was so much better in terms of breakup than the other 2 flights, I don't know. Is it, I noticed I was picking up my control a bit more that time. Is it possible that 868's getting in the way of the antennas that's on 5.8? I don't think there's much correlation there, but who knows? It's something to check out and work on. But for now, we've hit a milestone. It's not perfect. There's lots going on in the OSD that's not right. Lots more to do. Let's talk about it back in the office. And that's our story so far. Now, if you're wondering why there was a big delay since I found that I needed to swap the camera, it's mostly because that camera was out of stock for several months. It took me a long time to order it, but when I did, I managed to get it installed and flying, and hurrah. But there's also the issue I think many of us deal with about having the room to fly and a place to fly, coupled with having the right weather for it and having the time to do it, of course, which are all our enemies, I think. Now, as I mentioned in the video, there's still some issues with some of the support for telemetry in Betaflight, even though it's using iNav. So there's stuff I wasn't getting on the screen there. Hopefully that's going to get sorted out in version 2.1 of Open.HD. There's the added problems about supporting things that we sort of take for granted flying things like Betaflight, is that your stick, you know, go like that and you go into the OSD menu where you can change PIDs and stuff like that. Not supported on Open.HD currently, so if you wanted to make changes on the field, you'd have to have something you could plug into your flight controller to do changes with. I think that is the same situation as iNav, I'm not sure, but hopefully that's something that gets supported in the future.
As mentioned, I already spoke to the Open.HD community seeking some advice about why was I getting this breakup, what could I do, and I got some things to check out for next time I'll be flying. But while I'm there, I need to do a big shout out to the community behind Open.HD, both in their Telegram group and their new Discord server, because I've asked them lots of questions and I've got nothing but really useful and helpful answers back. Special shout out as well to Mario FPV. The reason I was inspired to use a much smaller existing Betaflight quad rather than flying that big old F450 is because I saw one of Mario's videos and he was putting Open.HD with iNav into a 3-inch quad, which sounds insane having seen my struggles about it. But what he did, of course, is he selected the right sort of frame and bits that would fit together really nicely. So he didn't have any of the issues I had about it sticking outside. He had a nice long base and his Pi Zero fitted in. And you know, that is a 3-inch quad, and he has taken this to 8K. So if you want to find out how to do things really well in Open.HD, go and check out Mario FPV's videos. I'll have a link to his channel down below and you can check it out that way. But big thanks to him as well, because he gave me a load of general advice and stuff, and he suggested this camera was going to be so much better than the other one, and he was absolutely right. So you might be thinking, why the effort to do this? You're flying a quad at 100 plus milliseconds of latency, you're taking all this extra equipment to you for the field. What is the point? Why are you doing it? Well, first off, this is my 10th year in FPV. Not quite there. I think June is where I started making proper FPV flights with goggles, but about this time I was starting to build my first tricopter, which I like to mainly think about as 3 sticks and a lot of hope. But at that time, it wasn't that different. I had a big tripod, I had a piece of wood that I'd made from an old shelf, and I had some of my components like my video receiver and my DVR wired up with a battery that I used to take around to the field. I had all these cables coming off that to my goggles tethered, so it wasn't that different to how it was. The difference is, what happened is, of course, things got better. I was using pretty old equipment, and, you know, I wasn't anywhere near some of the first FPVers. I was in a place where we were already starting to get refined, but since that time things have just moved on and on and on, and things have got better and better and better, and these days we don't really think about it. If you're flying a 5-inch quad, you can pretty much put Betaflight on and it's going to fly good, and you're never really worried about stuff. Open.HD is kind of where I feel it was 10 years ago, including that really interesting feeling of like I'm being an adventurer and I'm doing something really different and fun and interesting. That's hence this sort of invigorating feeling. Some of that's like, am I going to crash and stuff? Is something going to fail? But yeah, it's really exciting just to be feeling like you're doing something a little bit different than what you've been doing before. But I think things are probably going to progress. I mean, in terms of this is really hard to fit on a quad already. We're looking at things like this. This is the Okin module that I detailed before, and this uses a Pi Compute module, and it's much closer to a stack. The latency 100-120 milliseconds, you can get over that in 2 ways. You can up the power of the single board computer. Right now the little Pi, even though it's quite powerful, it's still having to run Linux operating system in the background, and it doesn't have the sort of dedicated hardware to do the video encoding and decoding that could make it quicker. So Mario FPV again has done some testing with the Jetson Nano, which brings the latency down to about 60 milliseconds. But ultimately, I think what we're looking for in the future is someone to produce a piece of hardware that can do it all for us. Essentially something like flight controller size or similar, that will have the hardware and just dedicate itself to doing video encoding and decoding and sending it down a Wi-Fi link. Essentially, that's what the chipset in the DJI and similar stuff is doing. Some people are already looking at this. Let's fingers crossed that things move along. I really do believe it will. And the other thing I don't want under any circumstances is my HD FPV to be dictated to by manufacturers saying, if you want to use our HD FPV, you have to use our goggles, you have to use our air and ground units, and we decide what power you can use and stuff like that. Whether it's DJI or anybody else. I want a more open infrastructure so we can choose what we want to do. But that's the future, and we'll see what happens. Fingers are crossed. In the meantime, I'll be back to fly this ASAP, because I want to do those changes and see what I can get from there. And of course I'm looking forward to the 2.1 release, so hopefully I can have some more information on the OSD screen, and then we'll be able to take this a bit further, because I'll be more confident about where it is and how I get home again. I'll also be looking at the Oaken board and installing this in this wing, which I'm obviously only part way through building, so I can experiment with some fixed wing Open.HD flying. If you got this far and you're thinking, hang on a sec, he didn't go on about what components he was using and how he wired it up in the field, it would be even longer if I did that. Go check the previous videos. There'll be a link down to a playlist down there somewhere, and you can check it out. And I went through all the stages of what I've been doing all the way along, and you can check that. But in the meantime, I hope that's been helpful. I'm sorry this has been so long, but there was a lot to it. Hopefully the next ones will be a bit shorter and sweeter, and stay tuned for those ones. Hope that's been useful, and I'll catch you next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.